"Get that man out of here now," whispered manager Carlos Mendez into his walkie-talkie, eyes darting toward the Chinese businessman entering the Grand Palace Hotel lobby. "I can't have distractions during this meeting." His voice shook as he tugged at his tie for the 5th time in 2 minutes. Liwi, a powerful real estate tycoon who controlled more than 50 prime properties across Asia, strode confidently toward the elevators, surrounded by 6 perfectly groomed executives. For Carlos, this moment had been 3 weeks in the making. A $300 million investment was practically guaranteed, at least according to his boss. All Carlos had to do was not ruin it. "Mr. Liwi, welcome to the Grand Palace," Carlos said, forcing a wide smile as he extended his hand. "It's an honor to host you." Liwi nodded politely but turned immediately to his team, speaking in rapid Mandarin. The sharp, questioning tone made Carlos's stomach drop. His smile froze. Panic rose in his chest. With trembling fingers, he pulled out his phone and launched a translation app. "I'm sorry, Mr. Liwi. Could you repeat that in English?" he stammered. The businessman frowned and spoke again in Mandarin, gesturing toward the hotel facilities. His expression carried clear irritation. Carlos typed furiously, but the app returned a nonsensical phrase. "Hot fish problem. Dirty water business. Not good." One of the executives actually stifled a laugh. I apologize," Carlos muttered, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Our official translators will be here in an hour." Liwi shook his head, clearly unimpressed. His next words, though incomprehensible to Carlos, carried the weight of finality. The deal, 3 weeks of pressure and preparation, was collapsing right in front of him. From the far corner of the lobby, almost invisible behind a cleaning cart, Janitor João Santos had watched everything unfold. At 34, João had long grown used to being treated as background scenery. In 4 years of work at the hotel, Carlos had never looked at him for more than 2 seconds. What no one in that lobby realized was that João understood every word. He wasn't puzzled by Liwi's Mandarin. He knew exactly what was being asked. The businessman wasn't complaining about the hotel at all. He was questioning whether the manager was truly aware of the new legal requirements for foreign investment in Brazil. João's grip tightened on the broom. He watched Carlos sink deeper into panic as Liwi hinted at walking away. Then, for a fleeting second, João's eyes met those of the businessman. Something unspoken passed between them. Liwi noticed it. The sharp intelligence behind a humble uniform, the calm confidence of someone who had endured far worse setbacks. In that instant, it was clear, beneath the chaos of arrogance and incompetence, a turning point was quietly forming. If stories about second chances and hidden strength resonate with you, make sure to subscribe and share in the comments how you would have acted in João's place, because what unfolded in the next few minutes changed every life in that lobby in ways nobody could have imagined. Flashback 3 hours earlier. In the basement, Carlos had gathered the cleaning staff. "Today, I want you all invisible," he declared, pacing like a commander before battle. "The guest arriving is worth more than your entire annual salaries combined." His eyes stopped on João, who was polishing a window quietly in the back. "Especially you, João. Stay out of sight. Don't wander into the guest areas. People like him expect higher standards." João simply nodded. It wasn't the first time Carlos spoke to him as if he were less than capable. What Carlos didn't know, and what none of the executives upstairs could have guessed, was that João wasn't just a janitor lucky enough to work in a 5-star hotel. He held a degree in business administration from a respected university, with a specialization in international trade. Years earlier, he had even studied Mandarin, chasing a dream of working in global business. But after sending out 143 resumes and attending dozens of interviews where he was always the second choice, João had learned a harsh truth. In his country, sometimes what people saw on the surface carried more weight than the education behind it. The job at the Grand Palace had been his last option before his rent went unpaid. As Carlos barked more orders, João thought of his father's words from the previous Sunday. "Son, You're 41 years old and still sweeping floors. This is not what I dreamed of when I sacrificed everything for your education." Those words pierced deeper than any workplace insult. And yet, as the meeting upstairs collapsed, Zhao sensed his moment approaching. Zhao's father had once laid bricks until his hands bled, working double shifts for 6 years so his only son could graduate from college. Every late-night study session, every family sacrifice, it had all seemed wasted. But on this day, watching panic consume his manager, something long dormant stirred inside Zhao. Li Wei's questions weren't about hotel rooms or service quality. They were about international compliance, foreign investment rules, and corporate structures in Brazil. Complex issues Zhao knew by heart from 2 years spent as an intern at a global consulting firm, a position he had lost when office politics decided that someone like him didn't belong at the table. "Mr. Li Wei, just a few minutes, please," Carlos begged, his voice trembling as he tried to salvage the deal. The businessman replied in a long, precise sentence in Mandarin, gesturing toward the stack of documents. Carlos stabbed desperately at his translation app. The screen blinked back nonsense. Paper number confusing hotel. Not good business. Maybe that doesn't make any sense. The words meant nothing, but Zhao understood them perfectly. Li Wei had said, "The documents contain contradictions in the corporate structure. How can I trust a partner who doesn't understand his own paperwork?" Checking his watch, Li Wei informed his associates they had 10 minutes left before walking away. Zhao recognized the tone instantly. He had minutes to act, or everything would collapse. Carlos continued fumbling with his phone, sweat dripping onto the glass. "Mr. Li Wei, I'm sure we can work this out," he pleaded, but the businessman was already losing patience. His final remark was decisive. "This level of unpreparedness is unacceptable for an investment of this size. Perhaps we should explore other options." At that moment, Zhao made a choice that would change his life forever. 4 years of humiliation, 4 years of being invisible, 4 years of wasted potential while others, less capable, rose above him. Enough. He stopped pushing the cart. Slowly, deliberately, Zhao peeled off his rubber gloves and set them on top. Each step he took toward the group was a quiet declaration. "My invisibility ends here." Carlos, buried in his phone, didn't notice him, but Li Wei did. The businessman's sharp eyes followed Zhao, intrigued by the calm, determined stride of a man who should have looked submissive, but didn't. What no one knew was that Zhao had studied Li Wei's company profile for months. It had been his private obsession, a way to keep his mind alive while his body pushed mops and polished marble floors. And now, unbelievably, the moment had arrived. Time seemed to freeze. On one side stood a desperate manager drowning in his own incompetence. On the other, a powerful billionaire ready to walk away. And between them, a man long underestimated, but holding exactly the answers everyone else needed. Zhou inhaled deeply, squared his shoulders, and approached. "Excuse me," he said, his voice steady but firm enough to cut through the chaos. Carlos whipped his head up, furious. "Zhao, this is no time for cleaning. Get out of here immediately." "Actually," Zhao continued calmly, ignoring the order, "I can help with the translation." The lobby fell silent. Even the air seemed to hesitate. Carlos blinked in disbelief. "You what? You're a janitor. Get back to work." But Zhao didn't flinch. He turned directly to the businessman and spoke in flawless Mandarin. "Mr. Li Wei, I apologize for the confusion. I can clarify your questions about the investment documents." Li Wei froze, his expression shifting from irritation to genuine surprise. Li Wei's eyes widened in clear surprise. Switching back to Mandarin, he tested Zhao with a sharp question. "Do you understand the current tax regulations for international investment in the Brazilian hotel sector?" "Perfectly," Zhao replied without hesitation. "The reforms passed last year actually favor investors like you, especially considering the holding structure your company already uses." Carlos stared, mouth half open, understanding nothing of the exchange. but from the change in the billionaire's expression, he knew something extraordinary was happening. "Who is this man?" Liwi finally asked in English, turning to Carlos. He manages our, cleaning," Carlos stammered, still trying to process the surreal scene unfolding before him. Liwi frowned. "A cleaning employee who speaks fluent business Mandarin and understands international law. That is unusual." Zhao allowed himself the smallest of smiles. For 4 years he had stood in the shadows, quietly observing business deals in this very lobby, watching errors, watching arrogance, and watching opportunities dissolve, always invisible, always underestimated. "Mr. A. Liwi," Zhao continued in Mandarin, "your concerns about the documentation are valid. I can explain in detail how the proposed structure aligns with both Brazilian and Chinese regulations." Liwi nodded slowly, clearly impressed. "Continue," and Zhao did. His explanation flowed with calm authority. He outlined the tax compliance framework, referenced international codes, and compared Brazil's new rules to similar systems in Singapore and Hong Kong. Every word demonstrated mastery, both of the language and of global finance. Carlos stood frozen, his mind unable to reconcile what he was seeing. The man he had treated as background furniture was now carrying a high-level conversation with a billionaire investor. "This is impossible," Carlos whispered under his breath. But it was very real. Liwi leaned forward, energized. He fired complex questions about investment agreements, tax shelters, and special economic zones. Zhao answered everyone with surgical precision, his confidence growing with each response. "Where did you study?" Liwi finally asked, still in Mandarin. "Federal University," Zhao replied. "International business, with 2 years of additional Mandarin studies. I also worked as a foreign trade consultant before. Circumstances brought me here." Liwi shook his head slowly, clearly baffled. "A man with your qualifications? Working as a janitor?" Zhao shrugged lightly. "Sometimes the job market has its own logic," he said. The dignity in his tone left no need to explain further. Liwi understood the unspoken truth immediately. "What is your family name?" the businessman asked. "Santos, Zhao Santos." "Mr. Santos," Liwi said in English, making sure Carlos understood every word. "I would very much like to continue this conversation in the conference room." Carlos finally found his voice. "Wait, Zhao, you can't just... I need to know what's going on here." Zhao turned to him with a calm that bordered on intimidating. "What's happening, Carlos, is that your collapsing $300 million investment has just become an opportunity to impress Mr. Liwi. The only question is, will you let me help, or will you keep treating skilled employees as if they don't exist?" The irony was delicious. The very man Carlos had ignored for years now held the keys to saving his career. When did you even learn Mandarin?" Carlos muttered weakly. "It was on my resume when you hired me," Zhao replied. Page 2. Additional qualifications. Carlos's face drained of color. He had never even bothered to read it. Liwi, watching the exchange, recognized a dramatic shift in power. "Mr. Santos," he said firmly, "I am impressed. I would like you to officially participate in this meeting as a technical consultant." Carlos swallowed hard, forcing a smile that fooled no one. "Of course. Zhao is a valuable member of our team." Zhao bowed politely. "It will be my pleasure, Mr. Liwi. I'm confident we can address all of your questions." As they moved toward the conference room, Zhao felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the unmistakable weight of being truly seen. Not as the janitor everyone overlooked, but as the professional he had always been. Carlos trailed behind, cold sweat running down his back. His arrogance, his ignorance, it had nearly cost the hotel the most important deal in its history. Worse still, his career now hung by a thread, tied to the very man he had dismissed and ridiculed for years. Liwi, however, was thinking of something else entirely. How could a five-star hotel waste a talent like Zhao Santos on cleaning floors? What other hidden abilities were being smothered under careless management? Inside the conference room, Zhao took his seat at the table, not as a janitor, but with the poise of a consultant who had been preparing for this moment all his life. For 4 years he had quietly observed. For 4 years he had studied. For 4 years he had waited. Now, his moment had come. What no one knew was that Zhao had spent months analyzing the complete portfolio of Liwi International, its investments, its contracts, its market strategies. He wasn't just fluent in Mandarin, he was fully prepared to deliver a consultant-level negotiation that could define a career. Carlos sat at the head of the table, where he had always felt untouchable, but now his power meant nothing. His eyes widened as Zhao calmly opened a notebook, filled with years of research, case studies, and market analysis he had built in silence while being ignored. For the first time, Carlos realized he wasn't the smartest man in the room. Zhao adjusted his glasses and opened his personal laptop. The screen lit up with a presentation so detailed that Liwi leaned forward instantly, intrigued. "Mr. Liwi," Zhao said in flawless Mandarin, "I have prepared some data that may help you evaluate this investment." Carlos sat frozen as Zhao moved through charts, forecasts, and financial comparisons, each slide clearly the result of months of work. When did you prepare all this?" Carlos whispered, still unable to believe what he was seeing. "Over the past 8 months," Zhao replied calmly. "Mostly during lunch breaks and weekends. I've always believed it's important to understand the market where I work." Liwi asked a sharp question about environmental regulations for new hotels. Zhao responded instantly, citing approval timelines and even drawing comparisons with projects in Shanghai and Beijing. "Impressive," Liwi murmured, clearly engaged. "Your data on zoning laws is more current than what my own legal team provided." Carlos made a last-ditch attempt to salvage control. "Zhao, that's very interesting, but perhaps we should return to the official presentation." "Actually," Liwi interrupted politely, "I'd prefer to continue hearing from Mr. Santos. His analysis is exceptionally thorough." The humiliation hit Carlos like a punch. The man he had treated as invisible was now leading the most critical negotiation in the hotel's history, with skill Carlos himself had never once displayed. Then Zhao turned to him and spoke in Portuguese, his tone polite but commanding. "May I suggest you focus on the hotel's operational details while I address the technical and regulatory points with Mr. Liwi?" It sounded collaborative, but everyone in the room understood the truth. Zhao was taking control. Carlos swallowed hard. "Of course," he muttered, his authority collapsing in front of everyone. Liwi leaned back, genuinely impressed. In Mandarin, he remarked that it was rare to find a Brazilian consultant so deeply familiar with Asian markets. "You're very kind," Zhao replied modestly. "I've always believed that understanding different perspectives is the key to global business." Then came the question that changed everything. "Mr. Santos," Liwi asked, "what exactly is your current position at this hotel?" Zhao's eyes flicked briefly toward Carlos before he answered, his voice steady. "Officially, I have been working on the cleaning staff for the past 4 years." The silence was deafening. Liwi blinked, stunned. "A man with your qualifications? Cleaning rooms?" "It's a long story," Zhao said diplomatically. Liwi's eyes narrowed slightly as he turned toward Carlos. "Mr. Carlos, I must say, I am perplexed. How does a company lose sight of talent like this?" "For 4 years." Carlos swallowed hard, sweat dripping down his temples. "Well, sometimes talent isn't immediately apparent." "Not apparent?" Liwi repeated, his voice heavy with disbelief. "Mr. Santos has just demonstrated knowledge that surpasses many of my own senior consultants." Zhao stepped in gently. "Mr. Liwi, perhaps it is best to focus on future opportunities rather than past misunderstandings." The grace with which Zhao handled the situation only magnified the glaring incompetence of Carlos. Liwi nodded slowly, but the loss of respect was written all over his face. "Mr. Santos, I would like to make you a proposal. How about we consider your direct participation in this investment project?" Carlos's head snapped up, his voice cracking. What do you mean?" "Simple," Liwi replied firmly. "Any investment we place in this hotel will come with one requirement. Mr. Santos must be promoted immediately to a position worthy of his qualifications." Carlos felt the floor vanish beneath him. Not only had his arrogance nearly cost the hotel its biggest deal, but now he was being forced, by a billionaire investor no less, to promote the very man he had spent years humiliating. That would be great, Carlos said weakly, his fake smile thinner than paper. Liwi didn't stop there. "And to ensure such waste never happens again, Mr. Santos will oversee all international communications regarding our investment." Zhao's face remained composed, but inside he felt a quiet satisfaction unlike anything in years. This wasn't petty revenge. It was justice. "Dr. Liwi," Zhao replied, "it would be an honor. I already have some ideas on how we might align Chinese cultural expectations with the Brazilian hospitality experience." "Excellent." For the first time that day, Liwi smiled warmly. "Now we are finally having a productive conversation." Carlos sat in silence as Zhao presented bold new proposals, cultural integration programs, staff training initiatives, even architectural designs tailored for Asian travelers. Each idea was sharper than the last. Each one quietly exposed years of Carlos's mediocrity. At the close of the meeting, Liwi leaned forward with one final question. "Tell me, Mr. Santos, if you could change one thing about this hotel to make it more attractive to global investors, what would it be?" Zhao paused only a moment before replying with calm precision. "I would implement a real talent management system. You'd be surprised how many valuable resources can be hidden in plain sight, just waiting for the right opportunity to shine." His words were measured, but his eyes were on Carlos. The message was unmistakable. Liwi chuckled, clearly enjoying the elegance of the answer. "Remarkable wisdom. I believe we will have a very fruitful partnership." The meeting ended with handshakes and new contracts on the horizon. Carlos, however, sat frozen. The deal was saved, but not because of him. In fact, it had been saved in spite of him. Worse still, every day from now on, he would have to face the living reminder of his own arrogance. Zhao Santos, the man he had ignored, dismissed, and belittled, now promoted to a position of power. As Zhao calmly gathered his materials, he felt the weight of 4 years lift from his shoulders. His patience, his silence, his resilience, they had finally found their moment, and the result was sweeter than any revenge could have been. Before leaving, Liwi handed Zhao his personal card. "Within 48 hours, he promised, your promotion will be made official." Zhao bowed his head respectfully. He didn't need to say anything more. He had already spoken louder than words ever could. When the conference room door closed behind Liwi's group, Carlos and Zhao were left alone for the first time in 4 years. And in that silence, the balance of power had shifted completely. Carlos sat frozen, carrying the weight of wasted talent, missed opportunities, and a lesson in humility he would never forget. Zhao stood to leave, but paused at the door. "Carlos," he said softly, "I hope we can work together in a more collaborative way from now on." There was no arrogance in his tone, just the quiet dignity of a man who had finally proven his worth in the most undeniable way possible. Carlos nodded silently, realizing that for years he had been holding a diamond in his hands, but had been too blinded by prejudice to recognize its brilliance. As Zhao walked toward the elevators, employees who had once ignored him now greeted him with respect. Word of the meeting had already spread through the hotel. Everyone wanted to stand on the right side of history. And there, in the very heart of a place where hierarchy and arrogance had once disguised themselves as professionalism, a new order was taking shape, like a broken symphony, finally finding harmony. Because true competence knows no color, no uniform, no social class. And sometimes, the sweetest justice is simply allowing talent to finally stand where it belongs. 6 months later, João Santos no longer pushed a cleaning cart. He now walked the corridors of the Grand Palace as Director of International Relations, his salary finally matching the 8 years of education he had fought so hard to achieve. Liwi's investment had transformed the hotel. 3 new floors, an international staff, and training protocols designed by João himself. In his new office overlooking the city, the diploma that once sat forgotten in a drawer now hung proudly on the wall. Carlos, meanwhile, had been demoted to night operations manager after an administrative restructuring, requested directly by Liwi himself. His arrogance had cost him not just prestige, but the trust of the board. "Mr. Santos," the new intern said one afternoon, "the representative from Liwi International is on line 1. João smiled, remembering the days when people barely used his name. "Put him through." In fluent Mandarin, he confirmed the expansion of the partnership to 3 more hotels in Brazil, this time all under his supervision. That evening, João found himself in the elevator with Carlos. The silence between them was heavy. "Carlos," João said gently, "I hope you've learned that competence has no uniform, no color, no class." Carlos lowered his eyes. "João, I'm sorry for the lost years." "They weren't lost," João replied calmly. "They were an investment, in patience and preparation. The best revenge isn't to destroy those who underestimate us. It's to build something so great, they finally understand what they lost by misjudging us."